All right, so now we have a really sweet treat for everyone. We have the CEO of Mesh. So I don't know if you've heard of Mesh, but they're kind of a big deal. They're the leading virtual credit card company on the market right now. And this gentleman is going to sit down with our very own Lee to discuss spend management. And so excited about this one. So let's go ahead, Lee, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, so thanks, Kathy. Hi, everyone again. Just one thing I want to cover before Oded joins me, because there was one additional question for Moore's panel or Moore's demo. And that question was which ERPs and HR systems we integrate with. So first of all, we integrate with all major ERP and HRs, mainly when we speak about ERPs, NetSuite and Workday. Those are the two leading ones. And in general, we have an orchestration layer to integrate with a lot of additional tools. We can cover more of that later. But I want to welcome Oded to our panel. Hey, Oded.
I think I was on mute. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm okay, just recovering from my red eye from Vegas.
Okay. Red eye, where to?
From Vegas to here.
Oh, to New York. Perfect. Yes. So I'm so excited to have you here with us. Oded, Mesh CEO, a great partner, and I'll let you introduce yourself first before we dive in.
Hey, hi Lee. So I'm Oded. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mesh Payments. Mesh Payments is a leading corporate spend platform. We help more than 1,000 mid-market and enterprise clients to boost their productivity of the finance team. Happy to be here.
Perfect. So let's dive right in. We are both in the spend management space, and we know that, in this environment, and mainly from the beginning of the year, everything is a big topic about spend management. Everyone speaks about that. What are the main trends you see in this category that are changing lately?
So for me, first of all, it's very important not to look at spend management as a one-size-fits-all. There is a huge difference between the different spend categories. And I think one of the biggest trends I'm seeing in the market, beyond the fact that finance teams that historically were focusing on how to optimize only the revenue of the company, and now it's more challenging, have shifted a lot of the resources to look at the spend of the company and to control the cost. And that's where spend management and procurement have really been instrumental. So one of the key trends that I'm seeing is on the understanding that they need to, first of all, look at the different spend categories and have different plans for different spend categories. It's not the same when we try to assess how you control your SaaS software spend to the way you control your T&E. Even though they are both under the spend management category, are different verticals. It's a different challenges. In most companies, there might be even a different team that is handling that. So it's a key thing, especially when it comes to T&E. One of the things we've seen with many companies that because COVID eliminated T&E totally, when T&E came back in the end of 2022, and it came back slowly, and there were like bursts of travel, especially around events. Many of these finance teams forgot what it means and what are the challenges they can face when there is such a uncontrolled T&E spend. And I think, and I'm seeing across the board, finance team reevaluating the strategy toward T&E, toward T&E control and T&E management, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, for now, there is a lot of historically the PO was a key process in managing procurement, and when companies during COVID have become distributed, there was in some stages finance team felt that every employee became a mini procurement manager. I think that's being reversed now, and companies are trying to assess what they expect to be still driven by a full-blown PO process, and what can be handled outside of that process. That's another key trend that I'm seeing a lot of the more sophisticated companies are now, it's a top priority for them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with both points. I think that for the first one, we do see consolidation of a lot of different spend management into one front door. Basically, you're in the credit card business. What we used to pay through ACH, now a lot of this goes into credit cards, but employees comes from the same door into, whether it's PO or ACH or credit card. They want to consolidate it all because employees don't remember that for travel they need to go here, and for SaaS they need to go there, and for a conference they need to go to the third place. So we see a very similar trend. And as for the PO piece, that's a very interesting one, because I do see two different trends with regards to PO. On one hand, companies lower the bar of what is required for PO, but on the other hand, smaller companies want to start a PO system and a PO process and have an ERP installed very early on comparing to when they did it in the past. Do you see the same? Do you also see a trend of having a PO?
So first of all, we ignore the fact that companies are still trying to assess what it means to stop doing checks. Okay, so checks has been a very dominant payment method pre-COVID. COVID has really changed that equation, but now I'm hearing more and more that it might come back in some places. So the finance team really trying to understand there are benefits for paying in different payment methods. To your point, in any way they want to see the data consolidated into a single place. Of course, the ERP, the accounting system, was always the single sort of truth, but they want to get, in many cases, it's too complicated for them to become an operational system. So they need some more modern front ends that will help them make insights. And second, historically, companies below 1,000 employees didn't even think about a procurement function. And that is something that is, and what we are seeing, that there is a procurement function, even not in full time, but is getting, the bar for having a procurement function is getting lower and lower. So we'll see even companies with few hundreds of employees already defining such a role, and usually that role will decide what the strategy, what the systems they want to use, what do they do today. But yes, I totally agree with you. If historically companies have pushed POs or full purchase order process into the highest amounts or to very high value transactions, because of the technology, they have the option to choose to do a full-blown process even in smaller purchases, or to use a spend management platform that will complement the purchasing process. In the end of the day, it's all about visibility and control, and there is different ways to achieve it. It really depends on the type of company. Technologically more startup oriented or software development companies have their own mindset. More old school companies, retail, etc., sometimes it takes them more time or to change or to adapt their existing processes. But there is, in my mind, it starts by the fact there is a new generation of finance and procurement leaders that are, by definition, expect technology to be a big portion of their day-to-day, and they are really looking for solution and are not driven by the complacency and inertia that maybe historically that was what was driving procurement and finance teams to decide.
I think that part of it, and that leads me to a really subject that we wanted to cover, and we covered a lot during the day-to-day. Both of our products require the finance or procurement person to stand in front of the company and say, hey, now there is a change in behavior. You now need to adopt to a new process, to a new tool that you, Mr. or Mrs. business owner, need to start working differently. What are the main tips that you can give to a procurement or finance people when they look for a system like that and they want to incorporate that into the company? What are the objections you usually see and how to handle those?
So for me, the key lessons from talking to many finance people is that there's still many of them remember or think that to implement a next generation technology is the same as implementing the traditional ERP or maybe the old school procurement and spend management system, meaning it's very expensive. It takes a lot of preparation and a lot of months of deployment. And only when they understand that with the latest technologies, that can be shortened dramatically, and the total cost of ownership is much lower and the ROI is much quicker. That is a key trigger for them to act. And it's all about act. Still, 90% of the organizations doesn't have anything or have a very old technology. So the opportunity is still huge. The second thing, which I think is becoming more and more clear, but it's still a huge hurdle, is the fact that finance teams or the decision makers, for them, the most important criteria is control. So they will evaluate systems only based on their ability to create sophisticated, highly controlled processes, which will immediately, almost in any case, will drive the employees to feel very bad about the system. And they don't understand that in the day after they will finish the deployment, there will be a lot of employees that will interact with that system. And even though they are virtual or they are remote, they don't even hear them shout on the corridors of the facility anymore. These are the ones, and I see more and more finance teams, they also take into consideration employee satisfaction. So they still wish to have control and visibility in many cases, but they also take into consideration the need to make the employees happy. And even with slight risk, remember, in the end of the day, most employees are positive and are trying to do things to benefit the company, and they are not all fraudist or bad employees. And you don't, historically, the only way to prevent this 1% or 0.1% of potential risk to the company was to put a lot of layers of controls that have been very hard to maintain, but more important, really created employee dissatisfaction. So I think that's something that is changing, and it's changing because the finance team are more and more feel confident in the technology. They usually will start small, meaning they will not transform the entire organizational infrastructure. Now they have the ability to start with specific type of payments and not try to reinvent all the company processes. But we're seeing more and more companies that have been becoming very confident in the technology are hiring the bar and taking and allowing employees to participate in more and more processes.
Yeah. Now, we are in an economic downturn, and financially, a lot of companies need to reduce spend, and it's not an easy moment for anyone in the industry, anyone, period. How do you see that the trends that we spoke about till now, and the fact that spend control becomes basically the main thing that CEO looks at? How do you see that across the board between different companies? How do you see that they do it, actually change the spend in the company? How does it happen?
So first of all, in practice, you're right. We've seen in the data that most companies have cut 20 to 50% of their spend. Of course, initially it started by media spend or some of the more obvious spend categories that were much easier to cut. But now, after doing that, I think the next thing, and that's what sophisticated finance team will do, they will try to prioritize, because in the end of the day, you cannot, there are some systems that are mandatory, and you need to understand that, and usually you cannot identify that by just looking at the payment data or the finance data. You need to converge between the business or operational data and between the finance and payment data. And that's, I think, that's what I'm seeing more and more finance teams are doing in real time, meaning they need to converge between the real usage of specific products and the level of payments, because that's the only way for them to prioritize and really to have business level conversation with the business owners about what they think they need to reconsider and what's not. By the way, the good news is that in opposite to a year ago, where you can call many of the vendors and they will probably won't even respond. And now even the most infamous vendors will cut a decent amount of the price by getting somebody from an organization, sometimes not the most sophisticated person, calling them and considering to offboard. So it's a great time for procurement professionals and for finance people, and to show real value to the organization. And real value is not only, it starts and ends by a significant cost saving.
Yeah. I think this is really the time for procurement people to shine, exactly with what you mentioned. But on top of that, we know that in the last few years, every company has duplicate tools, and there are so many tools in the market to identify those duplicate tools. But I think that one of the things that procurement can really help with is to identify this before it happens. So if someone wants to bring another tool to the company, maybe this is the right tool to bring into the company, but let's check before we buy this one, which other tool we can either negotiate because we don't need certain features, or we can eliminate, or we should not buy the new one. I think that the comparison that a lot of companies are doing today happens only with their existing portfolio, and where procurement can really shine is if they provide this information before someone's buy, and then they can really impact their saving, because that's a more unique approach.
Yeah, I've seen different attitudes by procurement people. Some of them see themselves as only responsible for the administrative part of the procurement, meaning they are being asked to buy something and are trying to get the best price, and that's where it starts and where there it ends. And other procurement professionals that are really trying to be involved in the more strategic level of the sourcing, of the understanding of what the company needs and why. It's really depends on the procurement professional, and it also depends on the attitude of the finance team and the openness of the organization to listen. In the end of the day, all these supporting functions can really helpful to the organization in many cases, but they can also put a lot of tedious processes that are not benefiting when just creating more friction. So
yeah,
I think that's one of the strengths of the new technologies, that they are really streamlining the processes in a way that it's clear for everybody how complicated is the process, who is doing what, and that's the only way to enforce or to orchestrate it is with technology.
I cannot agree more, because that's exactly why we are here. And I think that the only way that we can really streamline it is by making sure that we put all the right questions and only the right questions in front of all the right stakeholders from the get-go, and making sure we look at the entire process all together. Now, we all had, as startup CEOs and as part of the startup industry, we all had about 2 weeks ago a very tough weekend. And I know that you wrote about it as well last week. What is your take about how does the SVB, I'll call it the SVB weekend, because it didn't fall at the end. So how do you look at the impact of that weekend on the industry as a whole, and specifically on how we look at spend control and our responsibility to look at spend?
So I think it's too early to assess the long-term impact of that weekend. Okay. Again, the short answer will be like everybody will move their money to Citibank and JP Morgan, and that will solve the problem. I don't think that's good for the industry. It's not good for the finance teams. But I think it's too early to. I expect that there will be a lot of aftershocks and a lot of new regulations driven by that weekend. Specifically, I will say, as somebody that was involved during that weekend, a lot of conversation with very terrified finance teams. What we've
just came
seen
back from the conference, right? The conference in Vegas.
No, well, it was a week before. The conference was this week.
Oh.
That was it's time flies where you're having fun. But in my mind, one of the key things that have shined from that situation is that companies that have decoupled between the payment infrastructure and the software infrastructure and the banking itself were almost not impacted. Meaning, I look at all our customers, they just needed to redirect their funding source to a new bank account, make sure the funding is in the right bank account, and many of them are now planning to divide their funds between different financial institutes, and they can still operate in a unified payment infrastructure that will enable them to do everything without even changing. So most of our clients, beyond the anxiety of to move the money quickly to an alternative bank account, they didn't need to do anything when it comes to paying vendors, changing their card infrastructure, changing their processes. And that's a key thing, key lessons for all of them that have considered from time to time and get some solicitations from the bank to have much more unified banking stack with them. So beyond the fact that I don't think it's a good thing, that the crisis itself is not a good thing, and it's for sure will create a lot of aftershocks to the industry. The customers that have decided to unify their corporate spend infrastructure before understand even more the value it can bring to them, even in the post SVB crisis.
Yeah. one of the things that we saw that companies that didn't have a really good and maintained vendor list to make sure, because you're right, probably all your customers could go into Mesh and download all the vendors they pay by Mesh. But what about the rest of the vendors, the checks, the POs, it was all over the place. And companies that did not have a good understanding of where are all their vendors, who do they pay, who they are going to pay, we did see that quite a few companies reached out last week saying, hey, we need help because next time something like that happens, we need to make sure that we have a vendor list that is across all board, that we maintain it in one place. And what we saw is that we spoke earlier about the fact, or you spoke about the fact that we see procurement starting way earlier than in the past. We see that vendor management, that was something that only the very big corporates used to have. We start to see not that role, but that line of thinking, vendor management, vendor risk, start to be in smaller companies. And I think that SVB weekend will really accelerate that because of the need to consolidate all vendors and know to ask questions across all your vendors. Do you see something similar? To that?
So I think the biggest lesson is that when there is a crisis, it's better to handle it with the right data in front of you and not just to try to guess what's going on. That amplify the emotions and really amplify the voice when you have conversations and what's going on between your investors and you yourself and your management, etc. So I think the biggest lessons, or one of the biggest lessons from this crisis, is that you need to be with a very strong infrastructure across the board and to understand where everything is, and that can potentially help you to prioritize your decision, because remember that not only was a crisis, it was a very quick crisis. So you need to react very fast, which was different than maybe other crises that you had time to prepare for, or you had time to operate. Everything went very fast. Some of the SVB executives were not even expecting that few hours before everything collapsed. So in those cases, the only way to act wisely is to act based on data, and to act based on data, you need to have visibility into the data.
Exactly, because you cannot control what you do not see. It's the first thing you have to do is consolidation and visibility into everything you have, including vendors, including the payment, the different payment methods. The absurd is, by the way, is that a lot of the companies that moved money from SVB to, as you said, Chase or Citi or Bank of America, realized very soon after that the most safe bank today is SVB, because that's the only one that the FDIC said will officially protect, although I'm pretty sure that they will protect anyone that if Chase or we don't want to be in a case where Chase or Citibank or anyone else has a crisis. That will be a disaster.
Yes, that's what I think, that overall it's not a good thing, and I think we still have time to look back to assess some of the long-term implications of finance and companies losing trust in the traditional banking system. I think there will be a lot of opportunities out of that, but there are also a lot of risks. So we need to be very careful, as money is a very delicate thing, and we all really treat it very seriously. But I'm happy to that in the end of the day, as much as it looks very bad during that weekend, I don't think anybody lost any money, which is, in my mind, the key for the recovery.
Only the investors, but the stakeholder, the shareholders. But yeah, I totally agree. The industry is safe, or at least we dodged that ball. But hey, Kathy, I see you joined us, so I guess we're out of time. Oded, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll let Kathy take it from here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.